Good afternoon, everybody. So, as I was introduced, my name's Ian. I'm probably not what most of you would expect to see on the rookie track. I'm probably the oldest person on the rookie track. I am a rookie as far as Infosec is concerned. I started to look at Infosec last year, and I took my first paid position in February. So I'm a rookie in perhaps a different way. I name my talk the definition of madness. It's a phrase often attributed to Albert Einstein. There's no direct evidence that he ever said those words, but the sentiment of it, in my experience over the last 12 months, is quite key for Infosec. Before we get started too deeply, a little bit about me. I worked on my first computer in 1980. I worked on my first industrial control system in 1987. I took my first IT qualification in 1989. And looking around the room, probably some of you weren't even around then. So that's the first computer I ever worked on. Hands up if anybody else has ever used one. Oh, there's a few of you. That was the first industrial system that I ever worked on. It was an Argus Ferranti 500. It was originally built as an industrial control system, but the one that I used was adapted with a Coral 66 compiler, and we used it for a private military messaging system. I've spent 10 years in the RAF. I've worked in education, both as a lecturer and as an IT technician or network manager. I've worked in small business, one building, 30 users, and I now currently work for a builders merchant group with about 700 branches across 4 countries in Europe. Last year, we identified, maybe earlier than last year, but we identified that we'd got no operational security. We had a guy that sat in the corner doing policy, but we really didn't have anybody doing any operational security, any real kind of proactive security. And so they sent me away to do a course. The course they chose was this one. It was CEH. Now, there you go. You see, that's exactly the reaction, not quite from so many people as I expected it, but that was the reaction I got everywhere. But it's not that bad. I was really excited to go. I really, really enjoyed the course content. I came home full of enthusiasm to learn more. But what happened when I came back was that I got exactly that reaction. Everybody shook their heads. People ignored me. When I tried to reach out to people, I work in builders merchants. There's no other security people there. The only way that I could communicate with people was through social media, whether that was Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever it was. But when I reached out to people, the minute I mentioned CEH, I was cut off. Some, started to put me down, or they started to put the qualification down. They told me that I'd wasted my time and wasted my money. Pretty much, I was offered very little help and guidance at all because of the qualification that I'd done. On that qualification, though, I learned what data our systems leak. I learned how we can use open source intelligence to go and find exploits based on that data. How we can then exploit those using Metasploit and other tools that are freely available on the web with tutorials. I saw examples of privilege escalation, of lateral movement, and although it was on an unpatched XPVM, I delivered my first payload. I'd never, ever done that. Now, bear in mind that I'd worked on my first computer in 1987. Nobody had ever shown me that before. Nobody had ever explained any of this to me in detail before. I came home, as I said, really excited. For the first time in 30 or more years, I'd found a subject that I really wanted to kind of grasp hold of and work through. And when I got home and I started to reach out, pretty much that's what I got told. OSCP, Offensive Security Certified Professional. I guess it's the pinnacle of penetration testing or ethical hacking or offensive security. It's as far apart as it could possibly be, really. It wasn't helpful. CEH was a beginner qualification done by a beginner who is now reaching out for more help. Can you stand up for a minute? Sorry. I'm making him work. I practice this talk, I can move about, and I can't move about. So if that's OSCP and I'm CEH, how do I get from here to there? Do I go all the way around the room? Do I just go straight there in a straight line? What's the journey that I've got to take to get from here to there? There's no point telling me I've got to get there if you're not going to help me get there. That was what I found. Thanks, Kai. I struggled for some time after I'd done that qualification. I struggled with imposter syndrome. I started to question whether I was a bit of a fraud. I mean, I'd been doing this for 30 years, 30 plus years. How had I gone all of that time without knowing any of this stuff? And I started to ask friends and colleagues. I started to ask members of my IT team, other developers, some of the managed service providers that I went to work with in my new role. And actually, I found that most of them had very, very, very little understanding of how breaches occur or how vulnerabilities are exploited. And that everything you need to do it is freely available on the web. You don't need to be able to do anything clever. That's not entirely true, but you can get started really simply and really easily. And if you can find something on Shodan, you can start firing exploits at RDP, and we're going to see that in the next few weeks, aren't we? I wasn't alone, and that was quite key for me, that I found out I wasn't alone. This was an interesting tweet that a lady in the States put up, where she'd been told she wasn't cut out for Infosec because she wanted to study with other people. She didn't want to do it on her own. Malicious, I don't know if she actually made it into the room, but Malicious put this up, and it hit home to me because I used to work in education. I lectured in FE, and I worked in education both as an IT technician and a school governor, and it was all about learning. We were about professional development as well as about teaching students. And every Thursday morning, for 48 weeks of the year, for 5 years, we went into a staff room and somebody within the teaching staff or the support staff did a short presentation on some best practice or something that they'd found that worked well. So I got 24 hours a year of free training, of free professional development, because that was the culture within education. And it seemed really strange to me that we don't have that culture here, and that a newcomer that comes along that's just starting out gets told that he's got to go and do a qualification that's so far out of his reach because that's the only way he'll ever be taken seriously. Melissa's put in here, we need to move from try harder. Try harder has its place, but try harder shouldn't be the sole method we learn in Infosec. We shouldn't be telling everybody who comes in that they've got to go and do that learning on their own. If we're not sharing this information with each other, how on earth do we expect our help desk operators, our developers, our sysadmins to learn about security? You know, how many of them don't know about reconnaissance and enumeration and assessment and exploit? I'll tell you how many. A large proportion of them. I now, in my new role, go out and meet all of the people that we acquire. We're a business built on acquisition, and I go out and I meet all of these small businesses. All of their IT is outsourced, and I go and meet their commercial staff, and I go and meet their local IT support companies, and all of these managed service providers. Every single one I've met. So that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? I've met 4, but the 4 that I've met have absolutely no idea about this stuff. And when I say to them, why have you done that? Their answer is, well, because they asked us to. They never challenge it. But they don't challenge it because they don't understand they're doing something dangerous. We need to change the approach. I think we need to change the approach anyway. It's my opinion that we need to change the approach. We need to get away from the gatekeepers. We need to get away from this try harder approach. Unless you do no SCP, then you can try harder. And people say it's not possible, but it is possible to change attitudes. It is possible to change the way we approach things. In 1980, when I started working in computers, drinking and driving was a bit of a macho challenge. We'd go down the pub, we'd have a load of drink, we'd drive home, and then we'd go down the pub the next night and brag about how many pints we had before we drove home. And wearing seatbelts. There were cars that didn't even have seatbelts in them. Speeding was never talked about. Well, it wasn't because it was taboo or anything like that. It was just never talked about. It was just, speed wasn't something that was in the conscious mind. Now, 30 years later, you wouldn't, I hope you wouldn't think of drink driving. It's certainly got a different, attitude to drink driving, and it's frowned upon if you do it. Wearing seatbelts now is second nature. It doesn't matter where you get into a car, you put the seatbelt on. I got into a London cab last week when I was down here. You sit in the back of a cab and you put a seatbelt on. Speeding is quite interesting because it's become the new drink driving. Not even more than 2 or 3 years ago, really, you might have heard somebody say, "Oh, I've got a speeding ticket," on that flipping camera down the road. And the answer would have been, "Oh, those speed cameras, they're a pain in the backside. They're dangerous. They don't do any good." Now, I've heard those conversations, but they've been turned on their head because now people say, "I've got a flipping ticket off that speed camera down the road." And everybody says, "Well, if you weren't speeding, you wouldn't have got the ticket." So attitudes do change and can be changed. Oh, what's going on? It's frozen. There we go. Anyway, so away from driving, back to Infosec. We do need to change attitudes. Last year's course fundamentally changed my understanding and approach to security in IT. I went from being a team manager, delivering infrastructure, not really understanding what I was doing, to now being the operational active security person, building a security team, building a security culture. But Infosec is a journey. All journeys have a beginning. There are many destinations. There are many routes to many different destinations. If I'm trying to get to Kai, I can go around the room, I go up the middle of the room, around the back, I can go directly there. I could just climb over all of you just for the fun of it. One thing doesn't fit everything. One way of learning doesn't fit everything. And people don't know what they don't know. How can you try harder when you don't know what you're supposed to be trying? I presented this talk to my lovely mentor, who probably bribed you all with sweets to come in, I don't know. And he said, "It's fine having a rant, but what are you going to do about it?" And I didn't really know. But it was an interesting challenge. So I'm here today because I listened to a podcast and a lady called Rachel Toback issued a challenge. She said, "Don't wait until you're ready. If you wait until you're ready, you'll never be ready. If you want to do something, go and do it." So I did. I submitted my CFP, and I'm here today because of that challenge. So I'm obviously somebody who can't resist a challenge. And when Kai challenged me about what I was going to do about it, I didn't really know. So this is my first step, my first attempt at what I think we might be able to do. And actually, I'd like to build a new community for beginners, a community where it's safe to ask questions, where no question is silly. You won't be told to try harder. You might be told to try Google, but you won't be told to try harder. The only thing that I didn't have a chance to do is change the Twitter handle, because I set this up about 2 or 3 weeks ago when we were doing it, and Twitter in their lovely way, have removed the account, won't let me into it. So the Twitter handle now is InfosecNewCom1. The RS has disappeared off the end of it, and I didn't have a chance to change the slide. There is a Slack channel called Learning, Sharing, Securing. It's by invite only at the minute, because I haven't worked out how to do it any other way. But if you join me on Twitter, or you email me at that address, or you can contact Kai, I'm sure, who's also in there, we would love to have you join us, and we'd love you to invite other people to come and join us, because we can't do it unless we all do it together. And although I've ranted about how little help there was, I've had an amazing amount of help from the B-Sides team and from my mentor, and it's been a fantastic day here. This is my first ever conference, and I'm doing my first CFP. I'm doing my first talk at my first ever conference. And I've had an amazing amount of support at that, but it took a long time to get there. I could have done with that support 12 months ago. And that is it, really. If we don't change what we're doing, are we going to see different results?
So we really don't have time for questions, but I'm going to exert MC privilege. How many of you have taken the CEH class? Okay. How many of you actually got the CEH certification? How many of you got OSCP, sorry. Does that make you feel better? Lots of people take the class, they learn, use the tools, and no one goes for OSCP.
No, and the point I think I was trying to make is that's what the gatekeepers are saying. That's the first point. That's what you hit when you first start.
But no one has done that.
Absolutely.
Or very few people have done that. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much. Wonderful presentation.